Ms. Blair, Professor Harper, Naina, Sarangi, and all the organizers of this meeting, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and a privilege really to be associated with this event. I was promised that I can just be present in the award ceremony, but Naina is a very persuasive young lady. As many of you who know her will know, and it's very difficult not to agree to speak if she asks you to do so. I won't be very long because I know dinner is waiting for all of you. I just want to say that the rise of microfinance is relatively recent, and its recognition in the government sector as something that plays a very important role in the whole business of financial inclusion is now quite well established. I mean, we are in the government looking at ways of promoting inclusive growth, and financial inclusion is one very important part of inclusive growth. I think references have been made to different ways of bringing about financial inclusion. Microfinance is only one of the ways of bringing about financial inclusion. References have been made to self-help groups, and that's been a huge success. It's sort of a way in which the banking system has found it possible to lend to people who otherwise would be excluded from lending, but once they form self-help groups and perhaps demonstrate some sort of capacity to save, it provides a channel where they can get access to bank financing. But microfinance is actually special. It's different from this. It doesn't depend on too much government support. All they want is an environment that is facilitative, and it's a wonderful example of a huge amount of entrepreneurial activity. I want to congratulate the two award winners who received the award today and the family of the one who is not with us today. I think they've all been examples of real entrepreneurship, you know, creating feasible and sustainable economic models in an environment where most people thought that the normal profit-making banking system would simply not be able to go. Of course, one very important reason why they're able to do that is that the system is sufficiently deregulated that they can actually charge an interest rate which would cover the very high costs of servicing such loans. But I think people also recognize that they are providing a service to groups of people who simply otherwise don't get credit. So really, it may be that a microfinance organization lends at 25% or so, but it lends to someone who otherwise is so deprived of access to financial services that they would be ending up in the hands of truly extortionate, usurious people who would charge them 100%. So it's a clear contribution to economic activity. In many cases, it actually triggers off some productive economic activity which leads to income earning capacity. In many other cases, I've seen studies of microfinance which say that, you know, it's not so much what the microfinance does in terms of the income it generates, but it does a huge amount in terms of empowerment, in terms of a sense of self-worth, and that's particularly true in the self-help group area where almost all of them are women. And the gender balancing, the ability of these groups to actually take charge of their own lives is generally regarded as a very important part of the contribution that is made, not just the sort of small amounts that they borrow and the additional income that it generates. Of course, it seems to me that microfinance, I mean, the solution, neither the solution to poverty nor indeed the solution to financing for entrepreneurial people amongst the poor can be expected to lie in microfinance. I mean, I think several speakers have rightly pointed out, many more things have to be done to take care of the poverty problem. I hope we are doing, well, I hope we are doing all of them, but we're certainly doing many of them. And I think in time, the success of these efforts will be more evident than it may be today. But the key thing to remember, really, is that it's not, the important role that microfinance actually plays is that you've got a very large population which must have its normal endowment of entrepreneurial talent. Many of my friends tell me that, in any population, 2% of the people are highly entrepreneurial. And the thing that microfinance probably enables you to do is to identify those that really have that entrepreneurial capacity. But as many scholars have pointed out, for them to actually scale up and to show the real potential of this economic capability, it can't be done through microfinance at 25%. It needs to be done by handing over these success stories to the more normal banking system, which would then be providing them much larger amounts of money at the more normal rates. And actually, even if microfinance only plays that role, providing an avenue where populations that are large and are well endowed with entrepreneurial talent get into the business via microfinance, and then those of them that demonstrate that they really know how to do things are then able to scale up. I mean, many economists have studied this. I think Joe Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize winning economist, once wrote a piece which I always found very impressive. And he really asked the question, why is it that on the one hand we celebrate microfinance, which basically provides credit at 25% or so, but at the same time we say, well, but that's not going to be the route to actually achieving economic success. And I think the answer, as he puts it, is that the initial identification of the borrower is actually someone who is desperately short of capital, but has labor which they actually can't sell in the normal labor market. I mean, initially, microfinance activities probably survive because they are supported on the labor side by the entrepreneur's own labor. If it's a woman who's also looking after the household, she's providing the labor in bits and packets which actually could not be converted into a market wage. Makes sense from her point of view to do that, but it's not something that can be scaled up. But when they use this opportunity, those of them that really are able to succeed and do all the other things that entrepreneurial activity requires, then they might be able to access the normal banking system. So I think one of the most important things we really need to do is for the normal banking system and the non-bank finance companies, etc., to be able to use the microfinance experience in order to identify the potential winners with a good credit record, etc., etc. And I think the other thing is that the microfinance institutions themselves might want to scale up so that they can provide a wider range of services. In the longer run, clearly, the microfinance as we know it is more likely to get transformed into some form of non-bank finance company. And I think this is where it would contribute to the building up of a fairly diversified financial system which would service different needs and be subject to different degrees of regulation. I think the people who've been honored today are, in that sense, trendsetters, they're pioneers. They've opened up areas and demonstrated the viability of activity in areas which people had thought earlier were either not possible or were possible only as an imposition on the nationalized banks to do a social responsibility, which is not an economically maintainable activity. So I think for this, we ought to applaud them, and I do. And I think more people ought to know the success, the nature of the success. In fact, I was reading some of the brochures that have been prepared. And of course, Mr. Mahajan is quite an iconic figure, and his interview I strongly recommend everybody to read. I think it's very uplifting. It's wonderful for you to invite me to be associated with this meeting. Congratulations to all, and thank you very much.